Cancer, my friend, let's find some words of wisdom for you. Mm. I feel like there's a lot of I feel like there's a lot of pain in emotional capacity or in the ways in which cancer's healing or holding information right now. Um, Maybe even feeling like they're emotionally stunted, like they don't have the capacity to process this or go through this or what have you. Um, Very much feels like a migraine on the right side of my face. Um, I think that is also probably commentary on just the general inflammatory nature of things right now, and the inflammatory nature of things and stuff and ideas and happenings in the world, um, and war and pain, but also in our bodies, very much so. The weather and its twos and fros has very much also kind of wreaked havoc on some people who are very sensitive or who are dealing with um, disability in some way, shape, or form. And so, Two of Hearts, Eight of Clubs, inverted. Two of Hearts at the top of the deck, Eight of Clubs inverted at the bottom of the deck, which is very interesting. Two of Hearts being very much seeking companionship, seeking identity, seeking reflection, seeking reflection of that light, seeking understanding, I think, even. And sometimes that's the hardest part of hard time in our lives is like, why did this happen? Why did this happen to me? Why did this happen to, why did terrible things happen to good people? And trying to deal with that. And quite honestly, it's not something that can be dealt with in an analytical or logical way. And it's not something that I think we can explain away or try to build justice around. It is something that I think is very indicative of cycles of trauma and of cycles of pain. And so, if anything, please understand that the ways in which we're able to relate to the pains in the world is also our capacity to sort of neutralize it um, energetically or neutralize it in consciousness, and bring it more toward understanding and toward reconciliation and reciprocity than to avoidance or disassociation. The Eight of Clubs inverted, I think, is very much the ways in which exactly that disassociation is probably the prevalent response. It is very much the mind cycles at chaos and inverted. It is very much it is very much the mind expanding in all directions and not really sure what to do with it. It is very much, I think, even the ways in which we spiral down, or the ways in which we, oftentimes isolate because we're not doing well, not because we're going within, but because we're avoiding confronting the thing, or avoiding or punishing ourselves even from the thing that often pulls us out of it, or brings us some sort of solace, or brings us some sort of awareness or witness to a situation. People who hermit themselves away but are very social naturally are punishing themselves in some way, shape, or form. Um, the eight's inverted. The eight's inverted. It's almost like devolution. It's almost like one step forward, 10 steps back. Which I don't mean that to validate that if you're feeling that. I do mean that to say, like, I understand that that's what it can feel like. But again, hold yourself with some grace and some understanding, and you'll be able to see yourself more clearly across from you and in the mirror, not obfuscated by smoke and mirrors. And much like I always ask, who are you beneath patriarchy, beneath colonization, beneath capitalism, beneath, industrialization? That's who you are, regardless of these systems and beyond these systems. Hold that, my friend. Hold that. Hold that. I hope that serves you well, my friend. Leo. Leo, how are you? How are you? Where are you? What's going on? Leo. Interesting. 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 Four of diamonds, nine of diamonds. Four of diamonds at the top of the deck, nine of diamonds at the bottom of the deck. Which is very interesting. I think is very much the boundaries within which you operate, or within which Leo operates within you in some way. Four of diamonds very much came up earlier too, right? Very much being, like lanterns, or like torches in each direction, setting up the boundaries with which we can work in, or with which we can conjure in. Four of diamonds being also like markers, like geomantic markers within the earth, conductivity points. You know, X marks the spot on any given map. Um, the nine of diamonds. The nine of diamonds is a really beautiful thing. It's the ways in which we fill that space. It's the ways in which we take up space and fill that space. In a very real way, if this is a storage unit, is this all of the things that you love that aren't seeing the light of day that you ought to go through and bring some out and show some life to and some love to? Or is this a storage unit full of extra nonsense and nonsense that you need to go through because you don't actually know what you have, and it's taking up extra space and extra bandwidth? And little do you know, there's some gems in there waiting for you, waiting to be found. Or some form of wealth, really, hard up on cash. Maybe there's some stuff you gotta get rid of because it doesn't mean anything to you, but it's going to mean the world to somebody else. In a very real way, I think it's the ways in which we set the stage for our circumstance, the ways in which we set the stage or set the environment or set, create fertile soil for the kind of growth we want to see through spring. And much growth, many growth, fresh soil, deep blooms. And that's not to say go buy new soil. That is to say treat your soil well. Be very aware and embodied within your soil. Take responsibility for your soil, you know, and responsibility for yourself, again, in each direction, your past self, your future self, your masculine self, your feminine self, and allow that to take you somewhere beautiful. What I say to people all the time, if they are still operating from Western astrology, is throw your sun, moon, and rising out the fucking window. If anything, pay attention to your Venus and your Mars, because that says more about the ways in which you move through the world. And 100% that is starting to catch on, but very much in the same new age wave of like twin flame kind of nonsense, so be careful. Be careful, because this is also a full table and a full garden. We want not question that self and half yourself for believing that you need to find something else or someone else. And in fact, I think that's very much why so much of relationships falters, is because we're working with 50-50 when it is a full self reaching a full self, or a full self extending themselves and sharing their life, their fullness, with another full self. It's not 50-50, it's 110 meets 110. Hold that. I can feel it in my ears in the most lovely way. Virgo. Virgo, darling. More akin to the rabbit. Virgo, dear, what does this season have to say for you? Lovely. Interesting, my dear. Anchor into you. Anchor into you, into what your body is telling you, into what you know to be true. Please do not submit yourself to any rigid systems or structures or frameworks as something to abide by, because I get the sense that your body is revolting. 7 of spades, 10 of spades. 7 of spades at the top of the deck, 10 of spades at the bottom of the deck, which is very much 10 of spades inverted, a sense of overwhelm, but also, and maybe that's not a bad thing. Maybe it's just feeling supercharged, spring is upon us. Maybe we're feeling real frisky, real randy. Maybe we are feeling very overwhelmed. I think both can be true, sure, depending on the person, but both are really very charged feelings, right? So what do we do with all of that voltage? How do we direct it? And how do we release it, even, or ground it, very literally, with voltage? What's the best? Perfect. How do we ground that voltage so that it doesn't combust, so that it doesn't catch fire. The Seven of Spades is also inverted, which makes me wonder how much of what we are holding, or what we are overwhelmed by, or what we are feeling so beholden to in superficial stimuli, is even us, or is even, upholding our truth, or is even, part of who we are. Maybe that's a lot of options on the table, and not all of them are necessarily anything that you've considered before. That doesn't make it wrong, but not all of them are even things you want to do. Or maybe that's a lot of feelings in your body sort of dragging you into a state of malaise. How much of those feelings are actually yours? How much of those sensations are actually yours that you were holding, or are old structures or seeds of frameworks that were not yours? Quite honestly, in a very literal way, for sure, that's family. That's the way that we were raised. It's the nurture part of nature. But also, so is the structures and paradigms of thought that we live in today. So is capitalism. So is colonialism. So is puritanical ideologies, and often rooted deeper than you think. That is not to say that any anchor of this sort cannot be uprooted. In fact, it is very easily done as long as you know the difference between what is you and what is them and their bullshit. As long as you know the difference between where you begin and end, or where they begin and where you end. Yeah, it's very much what you do with it. Let it not displace you. Learn how to place it. Libra, how are you doing? What say you, dear? Ten of Spades, top of the deck. Ten of Hearts, bottom of the deck. Ten of Spades is very much a guarded reality, or a deep internal truth. Oftentimes I think it is our intuition, our heart of hearts, the space at the back of our hearts that is the truest, deepest part of that inner ocean, of that inner thought, the shadow side of us in reflection even, that is a most honest side of us. And this is what our intuition aims to unite, eliminate, transmute. The Ten of Hearts inverted. Again. Inverted again. Inverted again. I feel like is like a very putrefied sense of self. Is this where we're afraid of the shadow? Is this where we condemn the shadow, or we dismiss the shadow, or we dissociate from the shadow, or we ostracize these aspects of self? It is very much like a wound that has been left to become infected. And when we sever a point of ourselves, we sever a part of ourselves, and we never properly tend to that wound, then infection will grow, and it will still spread to the living body through the blood, through the water, through the hydrogen bonds in the body. And so even in trying to amputate ourselves of one thing or another did not work. In a very real way, society tried to amputate you from your intuition, and yet there are still so many signs that the body uses to let us know that there's more to it than we've been told. And so in that, like what Ghostbusters cards also, please don't run from yourself. Simply ask yourself what it is that this part of you wants. Be responsible with your energy and to all of your energy. And in Libra, a face of justice, consider in my last collective reading, my last collective moon reading, the ways in which we define justice. And often is that, assumed to be strict? Is that assumed to be righteous or self-righteous? Or is it assumed to be, or is it given proper room to be fair and reasonable and upright, just instead of right? Because that's the ego. The ego needs to be right. Justice just needs integrity. Hold that, my friend. And also check out that video. And let the rain stick disturb the stagnant or putrefied waters, and let it create more space to flow. Scorpio. The soft spot of my heart. Scorpio, Scorpio, Scorpio. What say you? Interesting. You heard how many times I just shuffled that. Same stuff, but opposite. 2 of spades at the bottom of the deck. 10 of hearts at the top of the deck, and upright. Would you look at that? Which even just in those few breaths, similarly to what we talked about with Taurus and like grounding and like hot spots beneath the earth, I very much saw like multiple steam piles, like multiple hot springs, or maybe multiple like drains during storms in certain cities will emit all kinds of heat throughout the city, or steam throughout the city, but also light and sort of like waves and frequencies. And I think that is the ways in which Scorpio, or the serpent, can be so frequency based, and can be so deeply rooted. Like even snakes like burrow under the ground, but they feel everything in the earth too. It is acknowledging the light within, like the power of energy and regenerative quality within. It is like willing to poke holes in belief, even to bring some kind of relief, which is maybe dirty work sometimes. Like, are you willing to poke holes in your own thoughts or beliefs so that you can get closer to the truth? Are you willing to pull out a little Jenga tower, or pull out a brick from your Jenga tower, just to see if you can stay true and stay solid and stay strong? And that's not to say recklessly so. That is to say, are you unafraid to question yourself and to question these things, and reevaluate these things that you've been taught or been programmed to or have been come to know? There is something really brilliant and beautiful and maybe even heroic about that willingness to pull that brick and investigate, or to pull that thread and investigate. And I think that opens up new doors for you in understanding. It's very much paradigm shift. In whatever ways Scorpio is in your chart, whether that's in a dominant way, in a Venus-Mars way, or not, wherever Scorpio is offering and inviting you to be curious and excavate, and to more deeply understand these things. And underneath that, once you poke holes in these veils of thought, you'll be able to see more clearly. Like, if all the world is, this fog and obfuscation and, honestly, even, emotion and loneliness, and the ways in which advertising very much, constantly capitalizes and inundates on those ideas, consider that the world is constantly trying to, like, put a bag over your face. And Scorpio's willing to be like, I'm going to poke holes through this bag so that I can see, and so that I can breathe, and so that I can move. That is not to say, that we're not taking the bag off our face. Obviously, that's the goal too. But Scorpio is willing to be like, no, we're going to survive this. And I'm going to be able to breathe through this and see through this regardless. Regardless of whatever unfair token I'm given, or regardless of an attempt on my life. Like, if somebody else put a bag on your face, quick move, you're not gonna, if the quickest thing you can do is poke a hole in it so that you can see and breathe, then we get to taking it off, and Scorpio will unmask and unveil, baby. If anybody is unafraid to do that, it is definitely Scorpio. And if anybody is willing to see or entertain a different paradigm, it is definitely Scorpio. Let that shake up any doubt. Sagittarius, how are you? Sagittarius. Sagittarius, Sagittarius, what say you? You know what's interesting too? Scorpio would bring those cards up because it is kind of an antipode or a, other end of the spectrum for Taurus and Aries and Gemini. I forget which would be the direct. I want to say it's Taurus. Alright, Sagittarius, Sagittarius, Sagittarius. Interesting. God, it felt like something was piercing my heart. And the Eight of Hearts, Ace of Hearts, comes up. How interesting. These are also really beautifully contrasting colors. And, on the color wheel or on Cycle of Harmonies or on how 12 signs would be plotted, we will inevitably move into Gemini season. And the ways in which Sagittarius is also antipode to that, I think will continue to lead us to rebuild, reframe, restructure, and also remind us of what it is that originally brought us here and inspired us, so that we can not sacrifice our heart as we move forward, and so that can stay very much intact and very much prevalent in whatever fights we lead and whatever peace talks or battles we must fight. Eight of Diamonds and this Ace of Hearts at the bottom of the deck. So what we bleed for fills us, fuels us, fulfills us, what we're... And what is the content of your blood? Plasma is very much, like stem cells and memory and kind of like a gold mine. But also the oxygenation levels of your blood, the ways in which your blood is efficiently breathing with you. So consider not just your literal health, but the ways in which you can breathe with the entirety of your body, the ways in which that your health can be more holistic in awareness, and to take to heart even the littlest things, as a benefit, and not to be too hard on yourself for everything. Maintain a loving environment for your body, and your body will continue to be a loving environment for you. I know that's easier said than done, and I know a lot of times I feel like our mind is the enemy or our body is the enemy and has betrayed us. But there are lots of people with a lot less limbs than we have that are still very grateful for our body and are finding ways that their body is something to be grateful for. So count your blessings and then count them again, and then remind yourself just how grateful you are. The Eight of Diamonds is very much the seeds that we sow and the ways in which we reap what we sow. And I think with 8 seeds planted, it's hard not to feel healthy, or it's hard not to feel abundant, unless we are impatient with the self or very critical of the self. And again, perspective shift, paradigm shift. Sometimes the deepest roots are not the first to flower. Sometimes we may not see growth right away, but we can trust that it is there because we put the work and the labor in, because we know the heart and the intention is there. So we can trust that there's a consciousness imbued into the intention and in the moment, and that we will be able to see a divine reflection of it. And this is the reciprocal process, the reflective process of the eights, and giving and taking and oscillating in that relationship, much like stars even oscillate within each other, never to dim the other shine, so to speak, but so as to work together in orbit and in flow. And so how can we be like that with our own mind and our own processes, and perhaps even the ways in which we relate, because these are matters of the heart after all, and so it would not surprise me if we were finding ourselves learning how to relate in deeper ways and in more patient ways. Take that. Hold that. Let it unfurl. May the rain stick, the mind, the waters in your body of who you are, and of integrating this information. Capricorn. Capricorn, you beautiful misunderstood motherfucker. Capricorn, what information do we have for you this Taurus season? Capricorn, how do you fly with the eagle at night? Interesting. Definitive. I like this. I like this. Capricorn's assisting us a lot in this grounding. There's always like a triangulation or a triad of these energies within their alignment within the calendar. It's like a chord at any given moment. And so wherever Capricorn is, I think will assist us in the grounding that Taurus is looking for, or the grounding that Taurus will like masterfully accomplish and step into even more so of itself in this time. Ace of Diamonds and the Three of Diamonds, which even in breathing and the ways in which that I felt, it was so much more embodied, it was so much more clear. God, even my energy is like just a little bit more ramped and clear. I'm hearing myself even more clearly, quite honestly. Ace of Diamonds being like a wish card on the, like, wish on a diamond, wish on a crystal, wish on a mineral. Like if you have a palm stone that you always turn to in your pocket, or if you love finding rocks on the beach, or if you have a favorite crystal that you turn to in certain times, or a crystal that you would turn to in these specific times. The Ace of Diamonds is very much that, like, sort of golden rule of channeling within that, and a sort of golden nugget of wisdom that is being offered to you, should you be so willing to receive it. Remember what I said earlier about Taurian natures being sort of, or negative ion capacity being sometimes too stubborn to be able to receive, and so rejecting in that, and costing itself some grounding. The Three of Diamonds that is in this is very much the patterns that we create and the ways in which we relate to them, and the ways in which we breathe life into them, or accentuate the patterns. This is the root of those eights that keep coming up and keep haunting us. With that being said, consider very simply mind, body, spirit. Or consider very simply, like I said before, both eyes, left eye, right eye, and third eye, and the fusing of and the transmuting of the independence of those, or seeing in those independently and bridging them all together. It is also, in so many ways, the reticular activating circuit of the brain and the ways in which your neurological system processes information. In a more spiritual sense, it is also the neurological cells in the mind, yes, but in the heart as well, and in the gut as well. And so we have these regenerative processes always happening, and we get to the root of its matrices, essentially. Even in the way that I was breathing was much more clearing, much more releasing, and the deeper diaphragmatic breaths you do, or any kind of holding breaths that you do, which is not safe for pregnant people, so if you are unsure as to whether or not you are pregnant and you are trying to conceive, refrain from withholding and holding your breath in breath work, because it's not good for everybody in you. But the ways in which something as simple as sitting and breathing can also be thoroughly regenerative for your cells, for your mitochondria, and for your blood and the oxygenation of your blood is a very simple, grounded practice, embodied practice to be able to directly innervate into the body, into understanding, into the mind and the ways in which it grasps information, into the body and the ways in which the water in your body holds and grasps and remembers information. Capricorn is like kind of an OG and an MVP in this situation right now, and is offering you a window into a little bit of a deeper breath and a little bit more of an aware breath. So consider that. Consider that. And if you are new here, stick around, because we do integrative breath with our new moon and our full moon readings, as well as with any TikTok readings that I pop in for, as well as other videos that will demonstrate the cycle of harmonies breathing with you. So that is one step that you can take. Likewise, there's various other meditation videos, or insightful readings and resources about meditation that you can take and digest and integrate into your life and into your practices. And if you are unsure altogether what all of that means, take a peruse, you can book a reading, and we can find a breathwork practice specifically for you and for the times that you are in. But also, my Decolonize Your Mind course has a full class on breathwork that I use on an everyday basis for health, for healing, for de-inflammation in the body. So consider that information. There's tons of avenues to begin that route and to begin repatterning that. There's no excuses. I knew that was going to happen. Aquarius, Aquarius. Aquarius, Aquarius. Light at the end of the tunnel. Interesting. Interesting. We heard how many times I hit that. King of diamonds, 4 of diamonds. King of diamonds, top of the deck, 4 of diamonds, bottom of the deck, which I'm pretty sure is the reverse of what we pulled earlier, which is very interesting, because this King of diamonds is almost like the capacitor of our charge. It is like the body, yes, but not just the body, like the ripples that it makes, like a stone in water. And the 4 of diamonds is very much the corners of the world that it reaches, or the edges of the shore that it reaches. In which case, the ideas of Pluto and Aquarius, everything's kind of shifting, everything's kind of different, but everything is also subtle and important and impactful, and, where the subtlest shifts in paradigm and in perspective can illuminate something new altogether, can suddenly make us see that there is, in fact, light at the end of the tunnel. And in some ways, so many ways, like how much weight we put on, like, Age of Aquarius and what have you, right, as this, like, age of illumination. But this is illumination and also the ways in which it's felt. This is a light on, and also the vibrations and the frequencies as they pass and as they spread. This is very much like a router, and like all devices connected to it. And so consider the ways in which ideas spread. Consider the ideas that you want to spread, and the ways in which they spread throughout the body, throughout the mind, throughout the life, and throughout relationships. To kind of piggyback on the last reading too, like, yes, breath practices, but also the breath is a really fascinating thing, and it also impacts so much. So if you actually do the Decolonize Your Mind course, the class on breath is located in the middle, so as to illustrate that the breath feeds so much of the superficial processes, and extends itself deeply, beyond itself into the surface, but also deeper than that, into the roots, into the source, into the soul, into the heart, and in the ways in which memory in the body and in the cells of the body plays a big part in that, which is why, the breath or the lungs can be very impacted by feelings like grief, by feelings like shame, by feelings like guilt. And so I think in a very real way, the ways in which the general population breathes very short or breathes very shallow, is, yes, high rates of anxiety in the world, but also very much the ways in which so much of the world is holding on to shame, guilt, and grief in a very deep way, and maybe doesn't necessarily know how to process it. So much of the Western world has not allowed us the tools to process grief, to process death, to process loss, or to process mourning, and we are not, defined by just mourning the living or the dead either. We live mourning versions of ourselves, mourning relationships, people that are still living, people that we used to be friends with, ideas of ourselves that we used to have or that we wanted to have, or mourning other people's ideas of ourselves because that's not what we want, etc., etc. But the ways in which we can process all of that information, that is something that is a source that also emanates, and that is, that grief is the rock and the ripples in the pond are the ways in which it makes our breath more shallow, makes our body more achy, makes our mind more foggy. And so consider not just like cause and effect, it's far beyond that. If you take my meditation course, you'll learn that for yourself. But more so the root and its extension of impact. And this is very much like, I think, in a very archaic ideal, like responsibility for the self, but also responsibility for impact. And sometimes loving yourself also means taking responsibility for the heavier and the messier emotions, so that you can also take responsibility for the impact that it's having in your life and in the life of others. Because 4 of Diamonds is also communication. Hold that, love. Hold that. And let the water listen. Pisces. Another beautiful water sign. Deep rooted, not just water either though. I think Pisces is the fire of water. I just did the video on it not too long ago, obviously. Check that out. If you personally identify with Pisces in a dominant way. And honestly, maybe more so if you don't. Interesting. King of Spades inverted, and the Four of Clubs. King of Spades inverted, and the Four of Clubs. The Four of Clubs is like boundaries or exclusion. The King of Spades is especially inverted. I think a questioning of self, a questioning of legacy, a questioning of lineage, maybe. A questioning of the contents of your blood, which in so many other ways that has come up thus far is, far beyond lineage or legacy too, but the memories and the contents of it as far as oxygen, as far as hemoglobin, as far as hydrogen bonds, as far as glucose content, but also as far as memory, charge, capacity, resilience, receptivity. So, we can take it in many ways, literal and metaphysical. I think Pisces is maybe being given an opportunity in that to learn themselves that much better, to learn themselves that much deeper. Because while I, gosh, even in those short few breaths, feel like I'm being, forced underwater, forced underground, but there's still sort of, glimmers of light at the surface, sort of like a starring, like a starry, or a glimpse of, sparklers even, which is, not the full picture, but glimmers of hope, very literally. And, where life maybe feels like it's waterboarding you, or forcing you underground, or forcing you deeper into darkness, it is also an opportunity to remind yourself of your truest light, because, the darkness, the depths of depression, the harshness with which we view ourselves, the rigid metrics with which we judge ourselves are not our own. They are very much colonization. They are religious and nationalistic imperialism. It is industrialization without humanity at the forefront, and regardless of any academic, I will argue to the nail, and the hill that I will die on, is that not ingenuity, but industrialization was not an integral part of civilization, and the ways in which we define civilization sort of beholden to industrialization is a product of colonialism and is a concept that we can in fact decolonize, because there are cultures that have thrived, have continued to thrive, that still remain to this day with lineage, with children who speak their language and who know their customs and their stories, that maybe don't have documented or written literature per se in the same ways that civilization was also demonstratized, but lacked the industrialization and the assembly line and the factory working that so coined our understanding of Western civilization. And so, do not hold yourself to those metrics. And that is perhaps the pulling yourself out of paradigm that felt so violent, I suppose, that felt so fierce, that felt so distinct. In so many ways, I think even a moment of desperation is perhaps arising. A moment of desperation where we fight to understand the self, or we fight to trust the self. And the Four of Clubs is what you will create from that new understanding. What can be created and what can be broken down or decalcified because of that understanding. Or what did I say originally? Like excluded. It's like isolating the problem and removing it. And not like isolating the land and removing the land, but like burning the top layer of soil so that the ash feeds the earth. Not like cutting off a dead limb per se, but like nursing it back to health, like physical therapy. I would also say don't be driven mad by old frameworks. In fact, perhaps it is time for them to burn down so that something new can be built in its place. Let that clear your mind. Last but not least, my dear Aries, as your misunderstood head of Western astrology, but deep beneath the feet as the Earth star in other paradigms, in other more grounded, more embodied paradigms. So misunderstood, dear Aries. Please check out my last cycle of harmonies, because we do talk about Aries very thoroughly. Aries, Aries, Aries. What say you as your season has passed, but all things new are because of you. I knew it. I knew it would come back up. It fell out, and I was like, well, if you're meant for me, you'll come back out. Queen of Clubs, Queen of Wands, Queen of Fire. And the Two of Spades at the bottom of the deck. Of course, I'm sure Aries is feeling very like, I got my shit together, it was just my season, and I've got all these ideas. Spring is coming back with a vengeance. Oh, yeah. But also maybe not. Maybe we're feeling very overwhelmed. Maybe we're feeling very stressed. Maybe we're feeling a lot of tension and pressure in our eyebrows. Maybe we're feeling very furrowed brow at the world, very judgmental, very at odds, very frustrated. Maybe we're feeling like the sun is too bright. And solar flares. It's been kind of rough. Especially lately. However, again, please go watch the Cycle of Harmonies as far as Aries, because there's such a misunderstanding of Aries energy, as far as Western astrology goes, that is very much just the one eye, and it's quite blinding. And exactly that, like, are we walking through the world blind? You know, walking through the world without glasses, like, you're gonna get a headache, you're gonna squint a lot, the light's gonna be too bright. It's very frustrating. Do yourself a favor. Expand your awareness and your understanding of self. And that is how we move with conviction, not just confidence. We move with integrity, beyond awareness, and we move with all parts of ourselves in coherence, and with great awareness and responsibility toward impact. So the Queen of Clubs can create anything. 100%, I think this is also like the ways in which, quite honestly, 13th astrology sign, that Ophiuchus is the creator of paradigms. And, you know, yes, we just finished Aries season, solar season, and we're in Taurus season a little bit for like a week or so now. But that is still ripe cusp times. And though it has been documented that Ophiuchus would technically be between Scorpio and Sagittarius, which is why I've identified with it so much, I do think that in Kairos time, not just the ways in which we understand it in a non-linear understanding of time, that Ophiuchus would exist between any cusp sort of situations between signs, in which case it is the bringer of a new paradigm as one sign matures into another. And this space in between, much like I said, yes, Taurus is eagle or knight, but it can also maybe be panther, and can also maybe extend itself into, or the ways in which it extends itself into, and beginning to understand Gemini energies with this Taurian nature. And that occurs for each sign, which is very interesting because that's also absolutely a way to consider watching this kind of content. You know, not just me, but any sort of all signs readings that you do find yourself looking at, is most often I think people will see them and they'll be like, well, my birth sign is this, I'm going to watch this, and I don't need the rest of it. And I think that is a great disservice to yourself. Much like the way, you know, we'll look at an astrology chart and think, you know, just because all of my planets stellium here but nothing here means all my focus goes here, but I don't pay attention to this. That's not necessarily true. That's not, that doesn't do, that is a great disservice to the self, and there is energy unaccounted for, energy lost, which is also part of how we deplete ourselves, because we're not even fully aware of our inventory and stock, right? And so, with things like these, you can also, you know, for sure, yeah, do your sun, moon, rising thing. Happy day. But consider your Venus and your Mars, maybe utmost, especially if you're working from Western rhetoric, and if you are more curious about what that rhetoric can be extended into indigenous astrology, then by all means you can hit me up and we can work on your chart independently. Or you can download the copy of Al Sear's Codex for yourself and be able to take a look and a gander and read a little about it for yourself. I feel like Aries would be dumb to take responsibility for themselves in that way, especially because it is a new tool, because it is a gift, it is an extension, it is an offering, and I feel like you're very open to that at this moment, especially with this Two of Spades. This is, again, an inner world, an inner door, but also seeds to our intuition. And so, yes, it is frustrating to not feel like we know ourselves fully, or to not feel like we can control ourselves even. Not that control is necessarily the word, or the word that I'm looking for, but I think the word that many of us are trying to understand, or using to try to understand ourselves, because it's not about control. But oftentimes we are much more controlled by our emotions, or much more controlled by preconceived notion, or by process of assumption, than we are actually holding of ourself in full thought or in wholeness. And so consider that and the ways in which you can integrate those understandings. It is also the only sign that is, maybe not the only one, but one of the most prominent fire-ridden cards to come out of most of these readings. And so I think that gives us some insight as to the root source of a lot of our problems, and it is identity-based. It is misidentifying the self. And so a lot of the unrest or unfulfillment that we feel is because we're identifying too much with surface, too much with the head, and failing to identify with kinesthetic sense, with place, with spatial awareness, with the earth, with the space that we take up, with our eminence. And so go beyond the literal. Go beyond the literal and challenge Western notion and understanding, and allow that to reveal a more total vision of the self. Oh me, oh my friend. Okay. What a trip through all cycles. And that is also a way that you can use these, is to just watch it all the way through. I love doing them all the way through because, while yes, I do identify with specific signs and have specific energies that are prominent within me, I learned so much about the cycle of harmonies and how all of these energies are very much interacting with each other. And so the signs that are my polar opposite, I learn a lot about myself because of that contrasting. Learning about the opposite is not necessarily a contradiction. Please understand the difference between a contradiction and a paradox, or a contradiction and a contrast. Much like contrasting colors don't neutralize or cancel each other out, but illuminate themselves, or illuminate the other to make it more bright, to make it more visible, to make it more opaque, if you will. And that is ultimately what we can do with the self as well. Our perspective of self can be very transparent when we are feeling halved, and when we are afraid of the antipode, or the other side, or the shadow self, or the contrast, or when we are too identified with the contradiction. Contradiction will neutralize, for sure. It'll half you to hell, for sure. But when we're able to extend ourselves to the contrast, we're able to see it with both eyes and extend our vision well beyond the self and deeply within the self. So, please join me in this strange little corner of the world where we decolonize our mind and we purge the patriarchy both within ourselves and without, so that we can see and strive for a more decolonial world. Because you know what, mark my words, I think that that world is possible, and that there is in fact a world in which we no longer have these cycles of trauma and these wounds to heal, or our children don't, so that we can start to actually see what momentum would look like from a peaceful and loving place, because we are responsible to it. I also think that in a truly decolonial world, we would have no need for Jesus or organized religion or any of these putrefied concepts. And so we would be able to actually heal our religious trauma wounds and these understandings around spirituality, or in the absolute antithetical difference that religion is to it, and the ways in which we can embody it. So, join me. Like, follow, subscribe, share, send to a friend, send to an enemy, and check out my website and see what catches your eye. And thank you to those that have stuck with me through the majority of this, if not all of it. I appreciate you very much. You absolutely bring a smile to my face and help me continue to thrive. If any of this resonated with you, you can absolutely donate to the channel. There are links in the description, but also if you go to mytotemodification.com, you can scroll down to the bottom, send me a letter of gratitude, or perhaps questions, comments, concerns, I don't know. You can book a reading, or like I said, a chart reading, chart translation, or a one-on-one meditation session. Or the other option is also that you can donate to the cause, and there's also a little bit of a short research paper for what I like to and intend to continue to use these funds for in an expansive remediation project. And gosh, what else? What else? I don't know. Check out the website. Love you. I'll catch you next time. Wata tanta. Tanta koi.